Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're going way back to ancient Persia for a version of the Book of Esther that you might not know.
Yeah.
We're talking about the one from the Greek Septuagint translation.
Right.
Which has all these, extra chapters that you don't find in the traditional Hebrew text.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, finding deleted scenes from your favorite movie. They can totally change how you see the whole story, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what we're doing today, uncovering these, hidden layers in the story of Esther.
It's true. It's like someone turned on the high beams,
Oh, I like that.
Suddenly you can see so much more. You get more of the why behind what the characters do, their fears, what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
It just adds so much more depth and makes you feel the story on a whole other level.
Okay, so to set the stage, imagine this.
Yeah.
Huge empire, ruled by King Ahasuerus.
Oh, yeah.
This guy is known for his lavish parties and, well, let's just say his queen Vashti, she wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. And that's actually where our deep dive begins. Not with Esther, but with a queen who basically said, nope, not going to do it, to the king.
It seems like a small act of defiance, Vashti refusing to appear before the king's guests.
Right.
But it really sets off this whole chain of events that leads to Esther becoming queen.
Oh, totally.
But even more than that, I think it really highlights just how precarious things were for women in ancient society.
Yeah.
Even when they were in a position of power, like Vashti was.
It really makes you wonder, right? Did her standing up to the king, did that plant a seed for Esther's own bravery later on?
Interesting question.
But before we get to Esther, we have another character that we really have to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Her cousin, Mordecai.
Yeah.
Who has this incredibly vivid dream.
Yeah, Mordecai's dream. It's like a mini apocalypse happening right before his eyes.
Whoa.
There are serpents, darkness, cries for help, and then this crazy reversal where it's the humble and meek who end up on top. It's not just some random dream. It sets this tone for the entire story, like a warning.
It's almost like a movie trailer. You get these quick glimpses of drama and action, and you just know it's going to be intense.
Exactly.
But here's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
The Greek version actually adds a part to Mordecai's dream.
Oh, really?
Where an angel explains that what he saw is a premonition of the struggle the Jewish people will face and also their ultimate deliverance.
That's what makes studying the Septuagint text so fascinating.
Yeah.
It doesn't just add new parts to the story.
Right.
It actually helps you understand the original story better.
So we've got Vashti's act of defiance, Mordecai's prophetic dream.
The stage is definitely set.
Totally. And that's when Esther comes in, this young Jewish orphan who gets picked to be the new queen.
Right.
But she has this huge secret, a secret that could get her killed.
This hidden identity of hers, it's such a crucial part of the story.
Yeah.
It's not just about the plot. It forces us to think about how people, even today, have to weigh the risks of being their true selves.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when they belong to a group that's often misunderstood or marginalized.
Yeah.
It's not cowardly for Esther to stay silent about who she is.
Right.
It's a way to survive in a world that can be pretty hostile.
And that's where Haman enters the picture.
Ooh, yeah.
Who's, to put it lightly, not a fan of the Jews.
Not at all.
He's got this simmering rage, and it completely boils over when Mordecai refuses to bow down to him.
Talk about holding a grudge.
Seriously.
What I think is interesting here is that it's not just personal for Haman.
Okay.
Mordecai's refusal to bow down, it challenges Haman's authority.
Oh,
And it triggers this horrible plan in Haman's mind to wipe out an entire people.
It's scary how quickly prejudice can turn into violence.
It really is, especially when it's mixed with unchecked power.
And the way they describe the plan, the way they plan this genocide, it's terrifying.
Right.
It was done with this, cold, bureaucratic efficiency.
Oh, absolutely.
They actually cast lots to figure out the day for the massacre.
The casting of lots, it adds this chilling randomness to the story, right?
Yes.
It really shows just how arbitrary persecution can be, how people can become victims just because of who they are.
It's a reminder of the real danger the Jews were facing.
For sure.
A danger they had no clue about at this point.
Yeah.
And then we have Esther, completely in the dark about Haman's plan, but facing a different kind of danger when she's summoned by Mordecai.
Right.
He tells her about the plot and begs her to go to the king.
Mm-hmm.
But appearing before the king without being summoned, that's a death sentence.
Yeah.
What makes Esther's choice even harder is that it's not just about her own life, is it?
No, not at all.
She has to weigh her loyalty to her people against the potential consequences if her secret gets out.
Right. It's like this huge moral dilemma she's facing.
And the Greek version, it gives us these extra chapters where we see both Esther and Mordecai praying to God.
Oh, yeah.
And we see their fear, their vulnerability, how desperately they hope for a miracle.
These prayers are so powerful because they really show the human side of these larger-than-life figures.
Yeah.
We see how much pressure they're under and how heavily the fate of their people weighs on them.
It's not just asking for help.
Right.
They're really wrestling with their faith and what they understand God's role to be in all this.
Absolutely.
So Esther decides to risk it all and go before the king, even though she knows it could be the end for her.
Wow, what a cliffhanger.
Okay, so picking up where we left off, Esther is standing before the king, her life hanging by a thread, all to save her people.
Yeah, you can practically feel the tension in that moment.
It really is a turning point, not just for Esther, but for the entire Jewish community, right?
Absolutely. Her courage is incredible, especially when you consider that she's going up against a system that was basically designed to silence women and anyone who was considered an outsider.
And the Greek version, it actually gives us this whole description of how Esther prepares for this encounter. She fasts, she prays, and there's even detail about what she wears. It really emphasizes just how serious this whole situation is.
And how carefully she had to plan everything out.
Like it was a military operation.
Exactly. And don't forget, she's not just revealing that she's Jewish.
Right.
She's accusing one of the king's top officials of planning a genocide.
It's incredible. It takes so much bravery and strategic thinking.
It really does.
And thankfully it works. The king extends his scepter, sparing Esther's life and telling her to make her request.
Ew, that's a relief.
But she doesn't just come right out and expose Haman's plan.
Oh, what does she do?
She invites the king and Haman to a banquet, not just one, but two.
Whoa, okay, that's interesting.
So now we've got these banquets filled with fancy food and wine, but with this underlying tension. It makes you wonder.
Yeah, what's the purpose of the feast? Is it just to stall for time, or is there something more going on?
That's a great question. What do you think?
Well, I think it's both. You know, on one hand, it gives Esther time to gain the king's favor and kind of subtly chip away at Haman's influence.
I see.
But on a deeper level, the banquets, they really represent the whole culture of the Persian court, this world of luxury and power where a single word from the king can decide your fate.
It's like we're watching a chess match.
Exactly.
Esther carefully moving her pieces into place.
And speaking of chess, things take a big turn during the second banquet.
Oh, yeah.
The king, feeling good after all that food and wine, asks Esther again to tell him what she wants, promising to give her anything, even half his kingdom.
This is the moment she's been waiting for.
He is.
She reveals that she's Jewish and exposes Haman's plan to kill all her people.
Whoa, that must have sent shockwaves through the whole court.
It totally did. The king is furious. He gets up and storms out of the room to cool off, leaving Haman alone with Esther.
Oh, that's not good for Haman.
Not at all. He panics and throws himself at Esther's feet, begging for mercy.
Uh-oh.
And at that exact moment, the king walks back in.
Oh.
He sees Haman on his knees in front of Esther and thinks he's attacking her.
Talk about bad timing.
It's almost poetic justice, right?
It really is, because the king is so enraged by this that he orders Haman to be hanged on the very gallows that Haman had built for Mordecai.
The villain defeated by his own evil plan.
It's a classic.
But the story doesn't end there, right? The king, realizing the danger the Jews were in, he gives Esther the power to write a new decree.
A new decree.
One that allows the Jews to defend themselves.
So they go from being helpless victims to being able to fight back.
Exactly. The original decree, ordering their deaths, couldn't be revoked because of Persian law.
Ah, I see.
But this new decree gives the Jews a fighting chance.
What a turning point.
So on the 13th of Adar, the day that was supposed to be their last, the Jews, armed and ready, they fight back against those who tried to destroy them.
That must have been an incredible moment, reclaiming their power like that.
It's pretty epic.
It is. The text even says that no one dared to resist the Jews because they were so afraid of Mordecai and the king's decree.
It's interesting, though. They didn't take any property from their enemies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were focused on self-defense, not on revenge or getting rich.
That's a really important detail.
It is. It challenges that stereotype of vengeful violence.
Right.
The Jews were fighting for their lives, their families, their community.
Absolutely. It was about survival.
And this victory, it marks this huge shift from mourning to celebration.
Yeah, the 14th of Adar becomes the day of feasting and exchanging gifts and helping the poor.
It's the beginning of Purim, right?
Exactly. A festival that celebrates their deliverance from being wiped out.
So it's not just about surviving.
No.
It's about taking a day meant for destruction and turning it into a day of joy and triumph.
Exactly. And the Greek version, through Mordecai's words, makes it clear that Purim is meant to be celebrated by all Jews forever.
Wow.
It's a reminder to never forget what happened and to keep telling the story of hope and survival.
And what I find really interesting is that the Greek version gives us more specific instructions about how to celebrate Purim.
Like what?
Mordecai really emphasizes the importance of feasting and being joyful and giving gifts.
It's like we're getting a glimpse into how this historical event became a tradition that's still celebrated today.
And it's not just about having fun.
No.
Mordecai also talks about how important it is for the Jewish community to be united and support each other, especially helping those less fortunate.
So Purim becomes a symbol of both their collective strength and their responsibility to one another.
It's incredible how much meaning is packed into this story.
It really is.
We've gone from a queen's defiance to a prophetic dream, a hidden identity, a plan for genocide, a daring rescue, and now this amazing celebration.
It's quite a journey.
But what does it all mean? What are the deeper lessons in this ancient story?
That's what we'll explore in part 3.
We'll delve into the themes of the book of Esther, especially the unique insights we get from the Greek version.
That sounds fascinating.
And we'll talk about what lessons we can take away from this timeless story.
I can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Greek version of Esther. I mean, we've been through a lot together, haven't we? From those lavish parties in the Persian court to, like, the edge of genocide and back.
It's been quite the journey.
And now that things have calmed down, Haman's met his end, and the feasting is over, it's time to ask, like, what does it all mean?
Right. We've got this incredible story, but the book of Esther, especially with those extra parts in the Greek version, it really wants us to think about some big ideas, you know?
Totally. So let's dive into some of those themes. One that really struck me was this whole idea of hidden identity. Esther keeps her Jewish heritage a secret for a big chunk of the story.
Right.
And it's not just about her personal safety, is it? It feels like it's about something much bigger.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a plot device. It forces us to think about what it means to belong, especially when you're different, when you're part of a minority.
Yeah.
Imagine having to hide who you really are, because it could have terrible consequences. That's something that people still struggle with today, across cultures and time periods.
It makes you think about those times when we feel like we have to put on a mask or hide parts of ourselves to fit in or avoid conflict, you know?
Right. And obviously Esther's situation is much more extreme.
Totally.
But her struggle to balance her hidden identity with being queen, it raises these questions about the choices we make and the compromises we sometimes feel forced to make.
Another theme that felt super relevant was faith.
Yeah.
We see both Esther and Mordecai turning to God when things are at their darkest.
Right.
But it's not this passive, like, wait for a miracle kind of faith.
No, not at all.
They're both taking action, making strategic decisions to fight for their survival.
It's interesting how faith is shown in Esther. It's
Yeah.
not about sitting back and letting fate happen. It's about being active, about knowing that we have a part to play, even when it feels like everything is out of our control.
It's like they're saying, God, we need your help, but we're not just going to sit around and wait. We're going to do what we can, too.
Exactly.
And you see that in the creation of Purim, too, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a day to passively remember that God saved them.
No.
It's a call to action, a reminder to fight against injustice and oppression no matter where it is.
And speaking of action, the idea of community is so powerful in this story.
Oh, it really is.
The Jewish people, they come together to pray for Esther, they support each other when they're in danger, and then they celebrate their victory as one.
It's not just about one hero.
Right.
It's about their collective strength.
The book of Esther really highlights how important it is to stick together, especially when times are tough.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we're stronger as a group, and that even in the darkest moments, we can find hope and strength in each other.
Okay, so we've got identity, faith, courage, and community all woven together. But what about good versus evil? Haman is like the classic villain.
Oh, yeah.
But is it really that simple?
Well, it's easy to see the story as black and white, right?
Right.
But it's more complicated than that. If you look at why Haman hates Mordecai and the Jews, it comes from his hurt pride and his desire for power. It's a reminder that evil often comes from human flaws, from those dark places inside us.
That's kind of scary, but also really powerful.
It is.
It makes us look at ourselves, at our own prejudices, and to really fight against those forces of hate both inside us and in the world.
Exactly. And that's what makes the Book of Esther, even though it's so old, feel so relevant today.
Yeah.
It's not just a history lesson. It's a story that speaks to the struggles for justice and equality that are still happening.
It's a call to stand up for what's right, to resist oppression, and to fight for a world where everyone can be free and true to themselves.
Well said.
So we've talked about it a lot, but before we wrap up, I have one more question.
Okay.
What makes the Greek version of Esther so special?
Mm-hmm.
Why should someone read it alongside the traditional Hebrew text?
The Greek version, with those extra chapters, it just adds so much richness to the story. We see what Esther and Mordecai are going through internally, we understand their faith and their choices better, and we get more details about how Purim came to be and why it's so important.
Cool.
It's like watching the director's cut of a movie.
I like that.
You're seeing and hearing things that give you a whole new perspective.
So if you want a story that's not just about good guys and bad guys, but about identity, faith, courage, and the power of community, then you should definitely check out the Book of Esther, especially the Greek version.
Absolutely. It's a story that reminds us that even when things are really bad, hope and strength can win out, and that we all have a part to play in making the world a better place.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Greek version of the Book of Esther. I hope you enjoyed exploring this amazing story with us, and maybe it's even giving you some things to think about.
Thanks for joining us.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.